Okay. I'm mainly interested, by the way, in getting the audio on here, not the video. I'm just recording the things. I didn't think anybody would want to see me for 12 hours. Okay. Yeah, here we are. What method of call sign identification is required for a station transmitting phone signals? Phone is voice. Okay? Send the call sign using either CW, code, or phone. I do not know anybody who's using CW identification, but if somebody wants to, it's legal. Now, the other question is, how many people are going to be able to read the CW and tell who it is? So, which of the following formats of a self-assigned indicator is acceptable when identifying a phone transmission? I tried to get this question out of here. It's too much explanation for what it's worth. Back in 1958, if I went to New Jersey, which is /2, I had to give my call sign as K3HQI /2 or /K2. If I moved from here to Virginia, I would get a new call sign that was K4, because your call sign had to be where you live. And you'll see the areas in a few minutes. It isn't anymore. There isn't even a requirement to do this anymore. This would be where you say K3HQI, either /K3 /W3, doesn't matter which, or K3HQI slant, or K3HQI stroke. It was just to say, I am not in my home area. It's not a requirement anymore. I've got several friends who have K2 and W2 and whatever. We've got a W1 in the club, don't we?
Yes, we do.
At least one of them. Okay? So I've tried to get this question out. The only thing I can say is all of those are correct. Don't worry about it. I just had somebody, we did a hike. It was a hike. And in the middle of the hike, somebody sent me an email. I didn't get it till afterwards, thank God. Complaining that we weren't using the /3 that indicated we were mobile, which hasn't been required since about 1967. And this is an extra class operator. Okay, the forehead is either getting flatter or the desk is getting rounder. Okay. Which of the following restrictions apply when a non-licensed person is allowed to speak to a foreign station using a station under control of a technician class control operator? You are operating the station. You hand the mic to somebody next to you so that they can talk to somebody in Canada or England. That is called a third party. Okay? The foreign station must be one with which the U.S. has a third party agreement. In other words, we must agree that you can do that. Now, let me ask you a question. Who's in trouble if you hand it to somebody and that happens? You. The guy in the country who the third party agreement is not allowed. He's the one who's breaking the law, not you.
So you don't have to cross-reference that and make sure that the agreement's in place.
Yeah. I will tell you this, we don't have a third party agreement with Great Britain. Believe it or not, it's the one place you would think,
And it happens all the time.
there's all kinds of weird stuff when you go international. Countries that you think would, Britain does not allow aeronautical mobile, meaning, okay? We had a balloon launched from California The people who launched it expected it might get to Colorado. They had done several launches before. A day later, it is going over our heads, going out over the Atlantic. Sometime later, it is now approaching Great Britain. And they're saying, is the RAF going to shoot it down? Because when it crossed the British international border, it was illegal. Fortunately, it turned south, went down into the Med, and went down off of Malta. They were just ecstatic. This thing went the whole way. The transmitter kept operating. This thing is up 70, 80,000 feet at one point in the movie.
It was sending a beacon every so often.
Yeah. It was using something called APRS, which we will talk about later. Hams do all kinds of weird things. But their first balloon went, I think, to Iowa and went down. And they're thinking, we ain't going to get much further than that. And the next thing they know, they've got one that's... We actually heard that, I didn't, but Dick Goodman was tracking it. He heard the last ping from it 300 miles out over the Atlantic from here on 2 meters. But you got to realize it's up in the air. What is meant by the term third-party communications? A message from the control operator to another amateur station control operator on behalf of the other person. It can not only be handing the mic to somebody else, it can also be taking a message and passing it on. Some nations are very concerned about that. Others are not. The United States, pretty much third party's okay. The only way you get in trouble is if it's a terrorist that you're relaying messages for. What type of amateur station simultaneously retransmits the signal of another amateur station on a different channel or channels? It's called a repeater. It can be another channel on the same band. It can even be what's called crossband, where you receive on one band and transmit on another. Those are very useful. Who is accountable should a repeater inadvertently retransmit communications that violate the FCC rules? It is the control operator of the originating station. When the Night Owls were operating on the SMRA repeater, it was not the SMRA repeater guys who were in trouble. It was the individual Night Owls. Now, that said, the SMRA guys, being somewhat responsible at times, did try to shut the thing down. Okay? I joke with them. Got to keep them honest. Which of the following is a requirement for issuance of a club station license grant? The club must have at least 4 members. El Presidente, Vice Presidente, Secretary, Treasurer. Think about it. You've got to have 4 members. By the way, a club can get a station license. You guys have N3 TWT?
Correct.
Okay.
Do you use that then as your repeater spell sign, or? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Many of the clubs have them. There's a club up in Berryville, Pennsylvania, Berry Mountain, northern Dauphin County. Less than 20 members. Very active. And they're a fun group. You ever get a chance to go up there and do their JOTA with them? Do it. It's a weekend you will enjoy. Do you know Susan Singer? Okay. Susan Singer and I have done that in a couple of years together up there with them. I can't do it this year. Simple repeater, what's it look like? We get a signal coming in here to a receiver. It comes in at 146.370. It goes across to a controller. You have a transmitter that it turns on, and the transmitter goes out at 146.970. Now, most repeaters use one antenna, but you can use two. You save about $10,000 though if you use two antennas. You don't need a duplexer, yeah. Unfortunately, you need two towers that are a little over 100 feet apart. So that sort of offsets that. When we did bike rides, I actually did repeaters ad hoc out in the middle of nowhere using two radios and setting antennas 100 feet apart.
The FCC's new channel spacing requirements have no application in
No,
Amazon.
no.
So all
We
that
have-
equipment that's being dumped into the marketplace is free game.
Yes, we are allowed to use what's called wideband. Wideband has to go away for everybody but us, and there's one other one that's still, I think it's 2 channels of GMRS or MERS that's still allowed to use wideband. I wasn't aware of them until a couple days ago.
Some of that old equipment is like, that stuff was built like tanks, that old Mycore stuff from Motorola.
Well, I've got, I have about a half a dozen of the old GE MVS radios that came out of police cars, taxis and stuff. All I gotta do is get programming on them. They're 40-watt radios, they're built like a brick outhouse. And I bought, I think it's 8 of them for $38. That's what it cost the guy for the flat rate box, okay? He would just wanted rid of them. My radio with a repeater. I transmit on 146.370. I receive on 146.970. But what you do is you program that into the radio so that you don't have to figure it out every time you talk to a repeater. And you put it in with channels. And I have my channels not named, like Carlisle and York 97, because there's a couple in York, and things like that. And I just spin up through. Which of the following, oh, by the way, my recommendation on programming radios, you learn to program one channel so that you know how, and you do it yourself, maybe with some help. Then what you do is you get somebody who's got a nice load for that radio, and you have them put it in your radio that has the repeaters in the area. The reason I tell you to learn to do it once is if you have to do it in a hurry, in some time when something's wrong, you need a channel you don't have, you've done it once. Maybe like me, the first time I had to do one out in the middle of nowhere, it took me 15 minutes. I can do them in a lot faster than that now. But I muddled through it on about the 6th try, I got it to work. By the way, it was the 146 dot, 646, 64, or whatever it is. Yeah, the one with the odd split. That's what gave me trouble. I'd never done one. We'll talk about odd splits in a minute, right here. Which of the following is the common repeater frequency offset in the 2-meter band? There is one for the 2-meter band, there is one for the 70-centimeter band. Back up. What's the difference between this and this? Subtract them. 0.600, right? 0.600 megahertz is 600 kilohertz. That's the difference. Every repeater in this area except one, and these birds here in Carlisle own it, okay, are 600 offset. Some of them are plus and some of them are minus, but they're all 600. For some reason or another, they've got one at 1,000, 1 megahertz. I don't know what the reason is. I'd love to hear that reason, but I'll probably not want to after I hear it.
Before my time.
Okay, I know. You'll find out I bust on the local team. I have fun with them. But I'm going to say this right now. I'm taking over a new job as the affiliated clubs coordinator for Eastern Pennsylvania. I am busting on the SMRA for only two things right now in that role. One is I want them to hold more classes, do a little heavier recruiting. Do you know how many clubs I'm not doing that with in Eastern Pennsylvania right now? So you're in with the rest of the group. The other thing that I am right now looking at them is I'd like to see them become a special services club. They qualify, they just ain't done the paperwork for it. A special services club, there are only two in the 8-county area out of 15 clubs. They would be number 3 if they just go fill out the paperwork. We may have to shoot John David to get it done. He's the one who doesn't like doing paperwork.
There's another one, but he'll be nameless.
Okay.
What were those special service clubs?
Yes, that's the same thing.
They are clubs that are well-rounded, that do almost everything that anybody does. They're the ones you can go to for testing. They're the ones you can go to for classes. They're the ones you can go to for support. They do community service. They just do it, okay? And that's one of the reasons that, close your ears, that's one of the reasons I recommend that club for people who live in this area. If you're not in this area, take a look at KVHF in York, which is another great club. They're two of the best.
Yeah, I've gone to some of them meetings that make me cry every time I go. They're just so mean. They're so mean.
Oh, do they? Okay.
You'll get used to
They,
it.
yeah, okay, but seriously, and I will tell you, I say that in other classes, those are the two that if you fit by distance, then if you're not fitting there by distance, then I've got a handful of others that, Red Rose in York or in Lancaster is good. LVSRA in Lebanon is good. They could do better, but they're good. Spark is good. So, but get into a club. Hit them. SMRA does the best regular technical discussions of any club. I've been in a bunch. I go to meetings. KVHF does the best hands-on stuff in the clubhouse. If you lived in Dillsburg, I'd tell you to buy into both and sort of go both ways. Okay? Because you've got access to probably the best of everything between the two. And by the way, KVHF will not kick you out if you go down and visit them at the clubhouse. And I don't think SMRA will kick you out if you're not a member and you go to their tech sessions.
And we have members that belong to both clubs.
Yes, I know. I'm one of them. Dick and Sandy are two others, okay? And why did I join SMRA? Well, it was just before I became a school board member, and I saw their I saw their tech sessions for 2 or 3 months. I said, man, I'm going to get in here. And then I wound up on the school board. Okay. But yeah, even some of the not so good clubs are still good places to be. What is the national calling frequency for FM simplex operations in the 2-meter band? This is just memory, 146.520. What do you do with it? If you're in an area you don't know, You dial in 146.520 and you call on it. Okay? And by the way, there's a ringer in that question. It's this one down here. That's the 70 centimeter band. Oh, it's not there. Okay. That is the standard calling frequency for the 70 centimeter band, which is on another question, not adjacent. It's where you dial that in. Now, I have them set up in my radio so that I can flip to them quickly. Again, they got a name on them. What is the common repeater frequency offset for the 70 centimeter band? Plus or minus 5 megahertz. The reason it's different has to do with technology of what are called duplexers, the things that allow us to use one antenna. You've got to be a certain percentage of frequency apart or they won't work. 600 is real tight, but it will work. The 70 centimeter band runs from 444 to 449. It's wide enough to use. It's actually wider than that. Yeah. But you can use 5 megahertz there. If you used 5 megahertz in the 2 meter band, one of your two frequencies would be out because it's only 4 megahertz wide. What is an appropriate way to call another station on a repeater if you know the other station's call sign? It's real simple. Say the station's call sign and then identify with your call sign. NC30 K3HQI. Simple. And if he's around, he should come back. K3HQI, NC30. How should you respond to a station calling CQ? Does anyone know what CQ stands for? Is anyone there? It's a general call. I want to talk to somebody, or I need to talk to somebody, or is anybody there? If you think of it as the two words, seek you. Okay? You transmit, if you hear me calling K3HQI, calling CQ, I drop off, you come back and you say, N3CO, K3HQI, or I'm sorry, K3HQI, N3CO, boom. The other station's call sign always goes first. And there's a good reason for that. I know that many of the emergency services has done it the other way for years. But what call sign is going to wake you up faster than anything else? Your own. If I call K3HQI first and then say N3CO or NC30, he may sleep through, and I don't mean that nasty, but he may not really pay attention to the first call sign. And then he's, oh wait, he's calling me. What did he say? Instead of the other way around, when I hit the end of NC30, his ears are up. Oh, what's going on? In CW, it is even more so than it is in phone. Which of the following is required when making an on-the-air test transmissions? If I'm just testing a radio to see if it works, and it's going on the air, shouldn't always do that, but let's say I am. I still have to identify the transmitting station. I need to somewhere say K3HQI testing, and at the end, I need to do it. What is meant by repeater offset? We talked about that a few minutes ago. What's the repeater offset for 2 meter band?
600 megahertz. Wait, for the 2 meter?
What'd you say?
600 megahertz?
600 kilohertz. But okay, you just be careful, because that's the one that answer is in that question to
Okay.
catch you, okay? I joke that it's designed to catch the unwary, okay? But yes, okay, it's the difference between the two, and it can be either plus or minus, because some of them are set this way, some of them are set the other way. The three things that you need basically to program a radio is the transmit frequency, the offset, and the direction,
What do you mean by direction?
plus or minus.
Oh, well, and often you need a code.
And most of the time, you will also need a
PL or,
PL tone. Okay, we're going to be talking about them later, by the way. But if you know those four things about a repeater, either that what the tone is or that there is none, if you know those four things, it's now just a matter of following the Chinglish in the radio manual. You know what Chinglish is? That's English that was written by a Chinese guy. Okay? Oh man, some of those. If you get a radio that's Chinese and you have trouble reading the radio instructions, go out on the web and search. There are actually people who have translated those into real English. Okay? But, all right. It's the difference between the repeater's transmit frequency and its receive frequency. What is the meaning of the procedural signal CQ? Calling any station. Is there anybody out there? What brief statement indicates that you are listening on a repeater or looking for a contact? Your call sign. If I'm just looking for anybody on a repeater, I'll pick up the mic, K3HQI, and drop off. When we hear somebody on a repeater calling CQ, we know that they're a brand new ham. It's sort of the, oh, we got one. Okay. And I'm sure most of us chuckle, but then you go into a mode of saying, well, okay, now can we help the guy out a little bit? Because he's new. And that's, but you got to laugh a little. What is a band plan beyond the privileges established by the FCC? Okay. In many of the, particularly the lower bands, we have what's called a band plan. If you're going to run radio teletype, this is a frequency that you're going to be on. You're going to run PSK 31, which is a digital mode. You're going to be here. It's not mandated. You want to run PSK 31 somewhere else? Go ahead. But you're probably not going to talk to anybody because the PSK 31 guys are always listening to that frequency. Okay, same thing with the RTTY. They listen there. It's a voluntary guideline using different modes or activities within an amateur band. The CBers actually have a band plan. If you're a trucker, you're on 19. It's voluntary, yes, but repeater versus simplex. What is simplex? Simplex is whenever I'm on one frequency, transmitting on that frequency, you are transmitting and receiving on the same frequency. We just talk back and forth. No repeater involved. Simplest situation. It's also one of the most reliable if we're in range. What does it take for that to work? 2 radios, 2 people. On a repeater, I transmit to the repeater, it retransmits. The advantage is distance. I have actually talked to people back here at York on the York repeater from Valley Forge interchange of the Turnpike. Now, it's a fluke, but it's doable. But there's a disadvantage. There's only one conversation at a time. There's only one channel here. Now, I know there's DMR, let's not talk about it. On simplex, I transmit to the other person directly. Disadvantage, we're within the range of the two radios. If it's HTs, handheld transceivers, it's a couple miles. If it's a couple of mobiles, it might be 5-7 miles. If it's a couple of base stations, it can be a lot further. But there is no reliance on infrastructure except keeping those two radios going. And there's more channels. Dozens of channels, hundreds maybe. And there are the standard simplex calling frequencies on some bands such as 446.000. Remember 146.520 we talked about a few minutes ago. Those are the two standard simplex calling frequencies. If you're out in the middle of the sticks, you're probably not going to get anybody on those. If you're in a city, you will almost certainly get somebody. I go down the Beltway every once in a while and flip one of these two on or both, and I'll sit there and listen to conversations. One of the rules is you're supposed to establish a conversation there and then move off. They don't. What term describes an amateur station that is transmitting and receiving on the same frequency? Simplex. Okay?
Is B a typo or?
No, that's one of those.
Okay.
That's what's called by
A distractor.
a distractor.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
What the attempt is to get you to be suckered into answering that. Okay? And there are some real good ones in here. Which of the following is a guideline when choosing an operating frequency for calling CQ? Remember I said we talk about courtesy, discipline. If you're going to call CQ, listen first to see that there's nobody on the frequency. You might want to ask if the frequency is in use. I don't think I've ever heard anybody do that. But, you know. And make sure you're in the assigned band. Yeah, it's always a good idea. So all of those choices are correct. You're being a responsible operator is what it boils down to. Oh, okay. You're just stretching. Okay. What is the most common use of the reverse split function on a VHF, UHF transmitter? It is to listen on the repeater's input frequency. Now, I'll give you something on this. When I transmit on the frequency the repeater's listening on. When I receive, I'm listening on the repeater's output frequency. Reverse split takes my radio. There's actually a button on many radios that will let you do this. And it flips it. Now I'm listening on the repeater's input frequency and transmitting on the repeater's output frequency.
A talk around.
What that allows me to do, first, one of the first public service events I did with the SMRA, they put me down on Rattlesnake Run Road, down south of South Mountain. They sent the newbie down there because if he couldn't get the radio to work, it didn't look bad. I'm totally convinced of that. Okay? I went down there. I couldn't hit the repeater. And I've got a pretty good rig. I've got even a beam antenna. I can't hit the repeater. I hit the reverse split button. And now I'm transmitting not back here to Mount Holly from South Mountain to get to the repeater. I'm transmitting up to Big Flat. And I can almost see it. I can talk to net control. Net control can answer me. I just am bypassing the repeater. And the funny part was, everybody could hear me in the team, and I could hear all of them. So nobody knows anything's wrong. Finally, one of the guys says to me, he says, how come I'm not hearing the repeater drop on you? And the answer is, I'm not using the repeater. But we can listen on the receiver's output frequency. We do that at times when we have a person who's doing some nasty things. We listen to them to try to find out where they're at. Really nasty when the guy finds out that they know who he is. Terms we're going to talk about. Squelch. How many of you ever heard VHF noise? It's what's there when the radio. Wouldn't it be neat to sit there for 8 hours and listen to that? Okay. Squelch is what keeps you from having to listen to that. What it does is it turns the speaker off, in effect, unless there's a signal coming in. The noise doesn't turn the speaker on. Unless there's no carrier or no tone. Tone can be used to turn the squelch on and off also. And then there's something called continuous tone carrier sense system. CTCSS. This is a sub-audible tone. It is low frequency, 88 to 250 hertz. It's, if you think of it about the dog whistles that are up around 20 kilohertz that you can't hear, versus this is down on the other end of the band. It's so low that you can't hear it. Okay? But when you key the mic, your radio creates that signal along with your voice. And the receiver hears it, and unless it hears it, it doesn't turn on the carrier or the audio. A receiver programmed to CTCSS will not open the squelch on a signal unless it's present. It keeps you from hearing background noise, interference, and stuff. It's really nice. Most of the repeaters have that tone requirement. You can sit there with your transmitter on the right frequency, the right offset, and punch the button, and the repeater will not honor you. When you turn that tone on, it does. By the way, most of the radios have something that's real wild. You set the tone frequency, and then you have to turn the tone on separately. And people forget to turn the tone on, they set the frequency, can't figure out why it doesn't work. I'm working with a guy right now by email, I'm pretty sure has that wrong. I even watched the video for his programming his radio last night to be sure that that was it. By the way, that's another resource. YouTube. Anything you want to know, just don't trust them with safety. There are some kooks out there. What term describes the use of a sub-audible tone transmitted along with the normal voice audio to open the squelch of a receiver? CTCSS. And I think that 240 there is wrong. I think it goes to 250. But doesn't matter. Continuous tone carrier sense system. Some of the other people will call it PL tone. They will call it private in FRSs. There's like about 6 different meanings. Just one little warning. If you ever play around with FRS radios, the only tone, on the FRS radios, you don't use the frequency. You use a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know? The only number that matches across the different manufacturers is 1. Some of them, 1 is this, or 5 is this value, and the next one, 5 is a different one. You program 2 radios from 2 manufacturers with 5, and they won't talk to each other. I have a chart, and I went nuts with it. I was working with 4 different models of radios. If a station is not strong enough to keep the receiver squelch open, which of the following might allow you to receive the station's signal? If you have a station that they're hitting the repeater, but it's going up and down, going off and on, you can't understand them, you use the reverse split and you listen on the input frequency and see if you can hear them. Sometimes you can't. Which of the following could be the reason you are unable to access a repeater whose output you can hear? Okay, you can hear the repeater, but you can't talk to it. Improper offset. If you have the offset set wrong way, wrong amount, you're going to transmit on the wrong frequency. They ain't going to hear you. The repeater may require a proper CTCSS tone. Yep. And it may also require a proper DCS tone. Do we have any of those in the area? I don't know of any.
I'm not sure about that. I don't think so.
As far as I know, we don't have any in, and when I talk the area, I'm talking down almost to Philadelphia and out almost to Pittsburgh. I know most of the repeaters. Probably there's one somewhere in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, or Washington, D.C. Those are the kind of places that use that. It's a digital continuous tone system. It's the same as CTCSS, except it's using a digital pattern. All 3 of those are correct. It works the same. Somebody decided that was a great idea. What might be the problem if a repeater user says your transmissions are breaking up on voice peaks? You're talking too loud. We're going to get into that a little later. Why don't we take 10, no more than 10, come back and somewhere right around 12 we'll break for lunch.